So burnout has now been described as the modern epidemic and the new normal. And as professionals, we have to push back on this. Even the World Health Organization had a recent report that came out and said burnout is no longer being seen as a health condition, but a workplace condition. And by definition, burnout involves what they call a syndrome of depersonalization. What that means is we feel sort of disconnected from other people. We might even be experiencing loneliness. And by the way, loneliness has now been called the new smoking as a health risk. So these issues of burnout and engaging in work and life have suddenly, started to present risks that we have to pay attention to. Burnout can also involve a sense of cynicism, like that high level of skepticism, like no matter what, things aren't going to change. This is kind of an inevitable fate. Whatever you're contending with, whatever you're dealing with at work, it's just like there's no way out of it. And it can also involve a sense of feeling like, you have to perform like a robot, like things become mechanical in your life and they become automated. Obviously, we are human beings, not human doings. And none of us want to sort of feel relegated to this fate of just overload, overwhelm, or to find ourselves depleted and feeling disengaged from life and disengaged from our work. I think that's a really sad thing for any of us who have worked towards upward mobility. We're working to find our definition of success, and then to find ourselves in these places of disconnect and oversaturation and just feeling, not in a place we want to find ourselves. So one of the things that we have to pay attention to is, first of all, to recognize we don't have to accept this as our fate. That prevention, for example, is less costly than repair. And oftentimes what we know is that we don't recognize the symptoms of burnout or of stress or overwhelm. We might know we're feeling a certain way, but we don't recognize its cumulative effect on us until we start to really get to that point of sort of overwhelm on our threshold. And in fact, the American Psychological Association says that we often don't know how stressed we are until we actually physically get sick. So picture yourself after, let's say you've been hauling at work or in your academic life, you've been pushing really hard, you have a lot of things you're doing, and you're sort of like just driving hard. And let's say you're lucky enough to kind of catch a break and have some respite or, a holiday. What happens? You get sick, right? Because all that adrenaline comes off your system. And I've actually written a lot about this and sort of said, it's almost dangerous to wait for your next vacation to enjoy yourself, to sort of practice what we call self-care. And, think about vacations. Cruise ship sinks, people throw up on you at the event, at the amusement park, someone breaks their ankle, or like I said, you might just get that bad cold, your adrenals are kind of shot. So the first thing I want you to think about is that burnout is preventable with direct attention to our well-being. And again, this is called self-care. And it's not that we want to sort of start to employ these strategies when we're feeling at that level 10. We want to be proactive. So what behavior science teaches us in terms of cultivating resilience, in terms of shoring up protective factors, is that self-care is a phenomenal path towards that. And by definition, self-care means that we set an intention, that we engage in a regular and deliberate process of attention to mind, body, and soul. So all this means is we're avoiding self-neglect, right? We're paying attention to the signals of our body that sometimes, quite frankly, we're taught to override. We're just taught to sort of just go no matter what, kind of down our coffee and push through what our brains and bodies are craving, which is some respite time. So one way you could think about self-care is that on the daily, you are infusing something called a break ritual into your practice. And when I say practice, think about it. Practice is something we need to do. It's not something we're perfect at right away, or that it just comes, on an intermittent level or once in a while, but it's regular practice. So it becomes automated for us to take care of ourselves. It's so easy to sort of set I think sometimes the mistake people make, and I've seen this in my clinical world, is we'll set this like big plan for self-care. Again, like that could be that vacation, like, okay, I'm gonna push so hard, and then when that vacation comes, then all that, like all the magic will happen then. Or, you know, once I finish my degree, or once I get through this deadline at work, or once, you know, the holidays are over, whatever it is, we sort of make these false promises to ourselves that don't necessarily pan out well. What behavior science teaches us and what the research reveals is that regular, everyday break rituals can help us prevent overload and burnout, and can help us really anchor ourselves down within very chaotic and complex environments. So what this means is doing an inventory. You know, self-assessment is an important tool for us to recognize what small activities have a high impact on our life. So it might be something as simple as a 20-minute walk as recalibration. It could be time with a friend that makes you crack up, that makes you belly laugh, that is a source of great recalibration and bringing you back to homeostasis, back to a place of presence and feeling good about life. Humor is a very big protective factor for resilience, in fact. It could be that you just really enjoy your cup of tea. And like that seems so simple, but how many times are we like distracted and on our screens and too busy, or it's not the right temperature, we're either like gulping it down when it's too hot, or it gets cold before we can even finish it. So this is actually also tied into mindfulness, but it's really about intentionality and being in that moment and taking things in. You know, our senses are actually a very powerful tool with self-care. Marketers know this. They'll try to sell us a lot of candles and fancy chocolates and wines and things like that. But our senses are a tool that we can actually take control of and leverage. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. We don't need to go to the spa for the week, even though if you can do that, that's awesome. But it could just involve just actually taking in a sunset. That doesn't cost any money to actually look at a sunset, to be present in it, to look at the tapestry of color, to connect with that. It doesn't cost any money to breathe. So many times when we're under stress, we actually forget to breathe. We clench our fists, we clench our jaw, we hold our breath. And that kind of position, unfortunately, is sending an alert to our brain something's wrong. That sense of constant urgency and frenetic energy actually has a negative impact on us. So even just the act within your self-care practice to just breathe, to slow down, to pause, to be in a space, to be in that moment, can be a very powerful tool for recalibration and also a protective factor for resilience. One of the most important things about self-care is to actually give yourself permission to do it. What I found in my clinical practice, my research, my teaching, and my own lived experience as a person who pushes really hard, and sometimes even as an expert in self-care, can leave it by the wayside. And I've had moments of burnout and difficulty as a result, recognizing again that we have to give ourselves permission. Every person really needs and benefits, even if you pride yourself at kind of being like a Leslie Knope kind of prototype, that you're a go-getter, you've always, just had that strong sense of work ethic and accomplishment. All of us, again, are not machines, we're not robots, and we benefit from taking pauses. And what's interesting is sometimes people think if I just like stay on the screen longer, if I just push myself harder, that the outcomes will be better. When in fact, brain science contradicts that. It says that a well-rested brain, a well-nourished brain, a brain that engages in fun and novelty and variety and creative endeavors, that kind of brain is actually one that is going to be more likely to sustain itself under the throes of stress. So again, those rituals really matter. So whether or not you feel like you're really, you don't need it, we all need to give ourselves permission. The other issue sometimes, especially for those in leadership roles or caregiving roles, is you're so busy taking care of everything else, putting out fires, the triage, helping everybody else, that it sometimes becomes that you forget to put your own mask on first. So self-care starts with permission, to recognize that you need to schedule this in, you need to ritualize it on the daily, because one day doesn't always happen. We can sort of think, oh, I'll do it when, and it doesn't always get registered as something we actually put into play. The other piece of self-care is that there's no one-size-fits-all formula for any of us. So again, that's where self-reflection comes in. When you think about career resilience, wanting to be resilient, then you need to think about, okay, what's my high impact activities? And given the variables of my life, what's possible? So for some people, it's like the choice to take stairs to elevate their heart rate instead of the elevator because they only have that little slice of time. For some, it's that they get up a little bit earlier to meditate, or they go to bed a little bit earlier and they get off their screen to really allow for full decompression. Or they make sure there's at least a yoga class or a spin class on their calendar in a week. Or they learn the power of a 2-letter word, saying no, setting boundaries, not letting everything else infringe on your time so that there becomes no time for self-care. So this level of permission, this level of ritualization, this level of assessing what works best for you, what small things make a big difference for you, those high impact activities, and then actually again making sure you're practicing them are the things that can help us to truly cultivate a sense of resilience, to avoid burnout, to avoid the modern epidemic of today, and to feel well and to be able to do well.